Hi everyone, welcome back to the Helen Olivia virtual workshops. My name is Lindsay and I'm one of the designers at Helen Olivia and I'll be leading you through the class today. So today you're joining for the Plum Tones class. We've got some really gorgeous, all different plums, purples, kind of burgundies that all lend to that same color palette that we're going to be working with today. And so if you just go ahead and grab all your supplies that you got from us, we can go ahead and get started. So the first thing you have is your bucket of ingredients. I'm going to set mine to the side. The next thing you're going to need is your vase, and you're going to need to fill your vase with water. So you want to fill it with room temperature water and leave about an inch of space at the top. An inch of space at the top, so when you're adding flowers in, it doesn't overflow because the water gets displaced. And you want it to be room temperature because you don't want it to be too cold because it'll shock the stems. You don't want it to be too hot because your flowers will open a lot faster and you won't get as long of a life for your arrangement, which is always the goal. The next thing you're going to need are some of your tools. So I've got a pair of clippers and a knife with me today. Sometimes clippers are just easier for hardier stems, like if we are using a hardier green. And then a sharp floral knife will be great. And if you don't have a floral knife, a sharp kitchen knife, something small like a paring knife is perfect. Nothing with a serrated edge because you always want that clean, sharp cut. So as we're going, I'll keep repeating it, but you just want to make sure you're cutting everything at a sharp angle because the larger surface area there is that's open for the stem to drink from, the more water it will take in. So it will just stay healthy for longer if you're doing those sharp angled cuts. So bear with me as I repeat that all throughout. The other things you should have that also came in your bag are a piece of chicken wire, and we're going to use this in our vase. And then you also have a Vanda orchid today. So we have these really pretty magenta purple Vandas, a little similar to the purple tones that we used for the Goth Glam class last week. And those are already in a water tube, so you don't have to worry about setting those in water. They're already in their own little source of water. So let's go ahead and get started. So we are going to roll up our chicken wire. So I always like to take the smooth edge, fold it in towards the non-smooth edge, or just pick one side and fold it in towards the middle, and then fold those ends in so you get that kind of cylindrical shape. And then what you can do with this is really maneuver it so it fits into your vase. And we've got these really cool tin vases today that are going to look really great with these purple flowers. So you can kind of just work with that to make that fit. And you want it to look as open as possible on the top because that is what we're going to be sticking our stems in. And we do have some really hardy big stems today, and we have multiple purple kale, which have the really large stems. So you want to make sure you're working your chicken wire so it's quite open inside so that nothing is getting sliced or jammed in there. So really take a second to do that, especially today with the kale that we're working with, because they do take up a lot of space. So you don't want any crowding in the vase. So what we're first going to grab is our Dutch hydrangea. So we've got these really pretty, sorry, just adjusting my table. These really pretty purple Dutch hydrangeas that we're going to be using today. You should just have one. And we're going to go in with that first because we don't want it to get lost. We kind of want to make it into a focal point. So we're going to stick that at the top. And then instead of mini green today, we have kale, which are going to kind of serve as our outline for the arrangement since they're so large. So we're going to place our hydrangea and then we're going to nestle the kale around them to hold it in place. And for hydrangea or for anything that we're putting in our arrangement, we want to make sure we're taking any low-lying leaves off. If you like any leaves that are at this level and you feel like they're not going to stick in the water, that's fine. Me personally, I just have one. I don't think it's adding anything. I don't think it looks very pretty, so I'm going to take it off. So you want to take off any of those low-lying leaves. And if you have an uneven stem, you can kind of shape it a bit by shaving those sides off if you need to. But the most important thing is you want to leave this long enough so it sticks right out of the top of the vase. So, and you want it to be close to the bottom or touching the bottom in the vase. So you're going to cut that at an angle and you're going to stick that in. So I'm going to stick that right there. Might look silly for right now because it's floating above the vase, but we have these giant purple kale that are going to look gorgeous and really frame that out. So some of them are bigger than others. You might have an assortment in sizes. The thing with kale is if it goes down the stalk really far, you can remove any of those if you don't like it or if you want it to be a little smaller. So you really can manipulate the size and shape of your kale, which is kind of cool. So I'm going to take off a few of these because I think it's just a little big compared to my other two that I have. So I don't want it to kind of dwarf the others. So I just took off some of the outer leaves. And then another thing that you can do with kale, these are already pretty big and have these like gorgeous fluffy edges, which I love. So you don't have to do this, but this is something that you can do. You can maneuver the leaves to kind of open up a bit more. This is already so gorgeous and flared out that it doesn't really need it, but that is something to keep in mind. So if you have one that's a little smaller and you want it to open up a bit more, you can definitely do that. There's lots of different ways you can use it. So for these, you're also going to keep the stems about the same length as the hydrangea. This one I'm going to go a little shorter, and I'm going to nestle this one in right here because I do think it's my biggest and I kind of want it to be a focal point right there. Another one I'm going to nestle under right here, and then another one I'm going to go in the back with, and I'll spin this around so you can see what I'm talking about. So to nestle under my hydrangea on this side, I'm going to go in with my smallest of the kale that I have. And again, with this one, I'm going to take off some of the lower leaves just because I think they look a little unnecessary. Get that nice sharp angle when you're cutting it. And as hardy as these stems are, they are actually really easy to cut, which is nice. So I'm going to nestle that right under my hydrangea there. And it's really going to hold that in place. And then I'm going to take the third one. And obviously we've got this big gap right here. So I'm going to fill that gap with this kale. And same thing with this one. It's so gorgeous and big. And this arrangement's going to be nicely shaped out for us to go and add all of our other elements after we've gotten these in. So nice sharp angle with your cut. And you're going to nestle that in. So now you've gotten kind of an outline of your shape of your arrangement. And now we're going to go ahead and start to add some of our greenery. So the greenery we have today is cotinus, which is also called smoke bush. This is really awesome. We love this in the fall, and I just love the dark burgundy-ish brown color of it. It's really, really pretty. And this is a stem that you can definitely split if you would like to. You can also just use the tops if you feel like the bottom of yours isn't so pretty. So you can either strip all these bottom leaves off, or you can try to split it. This is kind of a larger arrangement because of the footprint of the hydrangea and the kale. So I think I'm actually going to leave them long. So, or at least this one. These aren't really doing anything for me, so I'm going to take these off. So strip off any of those low-lying leaves, and then we're going to kind of fill these gaps that we've got and really exaggerate that shape. So first piece right there, and I've got one other piece, and again, like with this piece, these are not doing anything for me. I'm not going to be able to split it. So just take those lower leaves off and trying to decide which side I want it on, and I think I'm going to go with it right there. So we've got our two pieces of cotinus or smoke bush placed, and then the next thing we're going to grab is our 9 bark, which I have one piece of 9 bark, and this might be a variation in your formula, so don't freak out if you have one of one thing and 2 of the other. Just, you should have, I have 2 actually, so So we've got this 9 bark, which splits really, really nicely. And you can definitely use this as 2 pieces. So I just split that in 2. I'm stripping those lower leaves off, and I'm going to use this top piece, and I am going to tuck it in right next to my cotinus right there. Gorgeous. And then I can use this other piece, stripping off those low-lying leaves. And I'm going to tuck these low because these are a little bit smaller pieces. Tuck that low, front right there. Loving that. And then this one as well, I'm going to be able to split. So I'm going to split that right there. Use this, tuck that in. And then this one, I only have 2 leaves, but I'm going to make it work. So I'm going to add that right there. So now that we've really got the shape going, and I'm just tucking and adjusting as I go. So anything that you feel like is sitting out too far or tucked too far in, just kind of adjust as you go. The next thing we've got today is our seeded eucalyptus. So the seeded is this really pretty drapey greenery. So I'm gonna kind of let that hang in a couple places. And I've got, pull out my pieces. So I've got 2 pieces, and I sound like a broken record, but this is definitely something you can split. So any time that you can use something, you can use one stem more than once is great. So this one is just a single stem, not going to do me any good by splitting that anywhere. And since I love the contrast of this with the dark greenery, and I liked when I was holding it up here earlier, I'm going to tuck that right there so it kind of hangs below this dark greenery, because I think that's a really nice contrast and a little pop of texture right there. And make sure that your stems are long enough where they're touching they should be touching the bottom of the vase, or at least as close to the bottom as possible, because you want them to stay underwater as your arrangement drinks. So as your water level is dropping, you don't want any stems to be above water, because those will just go right away. So then I'm going to take this piece, which I can actually utilize in a couple ways. I'm just going to split it once actually and use this somewhere, and then I'm going to use this big piece up here with the hydrangea. So I'll show you. So that one's split, and I have all dark back here, so I'm going to tuck some in right there. Tuck some in where that 9 bark is, and gives that really cool contrast. And then this last one was kind of a statement making piece. And I have this gap where my hydrangea and my kale are a little bit distant from each other. So I'm going to take this opportunity to fill that right up with this gorgeous seeded euc. So pop that in right there. And it's already starting to look so good. So now that we've got that all placed, a couple things. I don't know if you prefer to lay things out on your table before you get started. It might be helpful to take a few of these things out now so they don't get tangled up with the roses. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my astilbe and grab my astrantia, just so I'm not breaking those stems as I'm grabbing my roses or my ranunculus. So I'm going to go ahead and put those to the side so I don't break those fragile stems. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to condition all the roses, and conditioning roses is just simply moving all your low-lying leaves, removing any of those guard petals, and then removing any thorns that you have. So be careful if you're trying to remove them and running your hands down the stem like that. If you don't have gloves on, it will hurt. So there's a couple ways you can remove your stems. You can use your knife and slice them off like this. You can just pop them off with your thumb, which I feel like I tend to do most often. And also you can cut them off with your clippers. So there's a few different ways to do it. And we're just going to go ahead through and condition all these roses. And we've got these really, really pretty, I'll show you the 2 varieties next to each other. We've got these really pretty blueberry roses today. And we're pairing those with these lavender moons, which just looks so nice together. Some of these will have some beat up guard petals, and just take those off. Anything that you don't like the look of, just remove. And these lavender moons are a rose that are a little tighter in the center. So this is a rose that you can blow on it a little bit to open it up. It's totally not necessary, but it's something you can do to kind of manipulate the look of them. So for the rest of these, luckily today we don't have roses that are super thorny, so that's a win. But yeah, just go through and do that to all of your roses. Take off all those leaves because you don't want leaves under your water in your arrangement. It will just cause your arrangement to rot, and your water will not be clean and the flowers will not enjoy that. So that's why we do all the work before, and I'm doing them all at once, but you're welcome to do each rose as you're ready to put it in the arrangement. I find that when I'm designing for retail arrangements, I tend to do it one at a time, just as I go. I think that's just what I'm used to, but when I'm really taking my time and doing something like this, I tend to do all the dirty work at once. So my roses are all prepped, and today we have 1, 2, 3, 4, we've got 8. So a good rule of thumb for roses, which you've heard us all say before here, and pretty much all you see is that we do groups of 2 or 3. So when you're doing groups of 2, you want to make sure they're staggered, and then you also want to make sure you kind of manipulate the dimension of them. So you want to make sure that you're sticking one out a little farther, or tucking one in a little more. It just makes it a little more visually interesting. And when you're doing 2s, make sure you're not putting them right to the side of each other or right on top of each other. So always stagger. And then with 3s, your triangle doesn't have to be so literal. It doesn't have to be this close to each other. You can, have them a little spaced out in the arrangement, and still gives that illusion of a group of 3, which is just like very visually pleasing. So let's go ahead and place our first rose. And remember, sharp cut at a sharp angle, and keep those stems pretty long, especially since we've got these taller elements today. So I'll show you where I'm going to stick my first trio. So this spot to me is kind of calling for a trio because I do have a little more just empty, it looks like vacant space. So I'm going to do a trio here. I think I'm going to do a duo here and then a trio up top. So we'll see if that changes as we go, but I will go ahead and start with this first trio. And since we've got a couple different colors today, you can pair them up before. I'm obviously, as you see, kind of going as kind of making it up as I go, but I'm gonna do 2 lavender moons, or sorry, 1 lavender moon and 2 blueberries for my first trio, because it looks really nice to pair them together when you've got different ones. And there's my first trio. And notice how I've kind of stuck these out a little farther. So these have longer stems than this one. This one's tucked a little closer because the stem is a little shorter. And then these have longer stems to kind of just create that dimension. So like I said, the next one I'm going to do is actually back here, and I'm going to do a duo. And for my duo, I'm going to do, and I like pairing two colors together, so that's what I'm going to stick with. So I'm going to do these 2 as a duo. Then my last trio is going to be 2 blueberries and 1 lavender moon. So do my duo back here. And this one I'm going to put in first, my lavender moon. And then these blueberries are a little more statement making. So I'm going to put mine up on top of it and keep that stem a little longer, like that. So that's our next duo, and it actually looks really nice right here because this kale color is almost kind of lending it to this as a trio. So it looks very visually pleasing in that area. The next place, you guys can't see the top of my arrangement, but there is a large hole right here where this seeded yucca is placed. And I really want this to stand out and kind of balance the height of this. So another rule of thumb is that if all of your roses, or say all of your blueberries, end up at the top, you might want to adjust something. So I have a blueberry here, and then so I don't really want my blueberries both right here. So I'm gonna make sure I put a lavender moon up tall, and then I'll put a blueberry and a blueberry lower. So keep that stem long because I'm going a little tall with this lavender moon. Whoops, got caught on my seeded. Like that. And then I've got a blueberry here. I'm gonna look at this from the front. And then right here is where I'm gonna place my other blueberry. And I'm gonna stick that out kind of far because I like a little drama. So long stem. Make sure you're remembering to cut that at that sharp angle. And then there we go. That's where that last one is. And the cotinus is just like framing that perfectly, which I love. So hydrangea too. And so since the hydrangea looks a little lonely on this side, I'm definitely gonna tuck some of my upcoming fill flowers on this side, like my Hydrangea, to make it a little drapey right there. So that's just something that just watch as you go and see what your arrangement needs, and then make any sort of changes that you might want. And I'm actually going to make a change right now because that probably will drive me nuts. So what I'm doing is taking my little piece of 9 bark that was tucked here, but I have that seeded here. So I'm actually going to tuck it over here just to make sure that my hydrangea is not just like, it doesn't just look like a globe with nothing around it, just a floating globe. The next thing we're going to do is our Ranunculus, because they have pretty thick stems, close to the size of a rose. And be aware that these can be kind of finicky when you're sticking them in arrangement. The chicken wire can cut straight through the stem because the stems are soft. So just be mindful of that. And these are fun because you can kind of let them stick out a little farther. You can tuck them in if you like your shape a little more subdued, a little rounder, then keep them tucked close. If you want something that's a little more dramatic, and since I'm doing this on video, I'm going to do everything like a little bit more dramatically. So I am going to put my first one right here. There's just a hole that is just lending to it perfectly. And just be careful when you're sticking those in because you don't want them to get sliced by the chicken wire, which does happen. So that, I'm going to float right there. And then I've got 2 more of these gorgeous plum ranunculus. So I am going to, we've got another spot right here that I think really needs one. And then I actually think I'm going to do a grouping of with the other one. So just really wherever you see kind of a gap, that is just perfect to fill it. On up here, and then I actually feel like I'm going to do one right there. So it's totally fine to do 2 right next to each other. And that is what I'm going to do. I just have this spot that's just asking for it. So that. And again, with dimension, you want to make sure that one is kind of a little further out than the other. And the next thing I'm going to do is grab for the Hydrangea. So Hydrangea is really cool. It has this really floaty texture, and it is just the perfect plum element for this arrangement. And it's just so fun. So you can stick it out. You can tuck it a little further if you want. I love the floatiness of it, so I'm going to keep that a little stuck out. And it's nice because it's creating that subtle contrast in this arrangement with all the darkness. So I have a hole right here that I'm going to use a piece. And sometimes you can split these as well, like we do with our greenery. So I'm going to split this bottom one so I can use that and that. So just keep that in mind as you are creating. So I've got that one there. Make sure that looks okay from the front because I can't really see when I'm facing it towards you. And then I've got this other piece that I'm going to float right at the top. That. And then I've got my last piece. And since I've got kind of 3 right there, I'm going to put this one here with that cotinus or smoke bush because it really creates that nice contrast with the darker elements in this. So put that right there. Perfect. And then we're going to add our astilbe. So this is our burgundy astilbe, which I love. It's one of the most dainty, delicate flowers. It comes in this burgundy color. It comes in blush and white, and they are all gorgeous. I love the burgundy in the fall. We use this a lot. So this is actually really popular in wedding bouquets and wedding design as well. So again, this is just creating another element of texture and different shapes, and it can help you balance out your height of your arrangement. So I'm putting that first piece here, and then I've got this place near my dark ranunculus that I'm going to stick one in right next to that blueberry rose. So break up those 2 blueberries like that. And with something like this, you don't just want to do 2 at the same height. So I've got this one a little taller, this one a little lower. And then I'm actually going to do a grouping of 2 because you just don't want things to end up looking like an antenna. So I'm going to stick this one a little lower right in here. Right near that cotinus. If it'll go in. Perfect. Making sure I'm not leaving a stem out. So then I've got these 2 there. It's really looking beautiful. And then the last, I guess I'm on the last thing. The last thing that we have today is our Vanda orchid. So this is something that I'm actually going to tuck right up near my hydrangea on this side, because on this side, the hydrangea is a little more tucked away. And on this side, the hydrangea is a focal point, but I don't like this patch of green that's really standing out right there. So I'm going to pop mine right in there. We'll see if what I say works out for me. Perfect. Like that. And then you've got that really pretty astilbe right under there. Hydrangea. And that is the Plum Tones arrangement. Thank you so much for joining us again for these virtual workshops. We really love doing these, and I have had a blast joining the team in doing these. So look up our upcoming workshops. Make sure you get in on those Thanksgiving ones, and make sure you're caring for your arrangement. Don't put it in direct sunlight. Make sure adding fresh water every day, and it should stay fresh for 5 to 7 days about. So just take good care of it. As long as those stems are in water and they're in fresh water, they'll be happy. So top it off with water. And as soon as it gets a little yucky, you can just completely fill it with fresh water and it'll be great. So enjoy your flowers. And I hope you enjoyed this class. And thank you so much for joining us again. My name is Lindsay, and we thank you for joining us today.